What's the creepiest thing that's ever happened to you or someone you know? Serious. Back in the early 90s, my sister took my nephew to a playground to play. When they were leaving, she noticed a man approaching her. He was well dressed in a suit, and seemed to be driving a beat-up pickup truck. He asked her if she could drive him to the gas station a few blocks up so he could call a tow truck. As his truck had broken down, she told him no, that would make her uncomfortable, but she would gladly stop at the gas station and call the tow truck for him. He started to insist it was only a couple blocks and he was already very late for work. Now feeling very uncomfortable, she said no again. He then got mad, really mad, and yelled at her, "I only wanted you to take me home." She knocked right out of there, jumped in the car, backed up quickly, and rolled the window down just enough to say, "Don't worry, I'll call a police officer to help at the gas station," and sped off. She did stop at the gas station, call the police, and returned to the park with the police officer. The guy and his truck were nowhere to be found. My neighbor had a stalker. The man would sit in the car and watch her, hide in bushes. It was awful for her. We called the cops on him several times. This happened about 3 years ago or so. I was sitting in the kitchen, and it was around 10 p.m. or so. I heard a really loud thump in the basement. I live alone with 2 dogs, so any sound is somewhat frightening to me. So, as I'm walking down the stairs to the basement, I hear the thumping again, in an oddly rhythmic pattern. I creak open the door into the basement bedroom, and I see my dog is just ramming his head and body into the wall, over and over. I can't explain to you how shockingly unnatural looking it was. It looked like he was controlled or something. I called him over, and he stopped and came upstairs with me. 3 hours later, I hear the thumping again. I get out of bed again. However, when I went down to check it, it was my other dog that was ramming his head into the wall. It was like he was possessed. Scared the cheese out of me. Since then, nothing like that has happened, but what an unexplainable event. I worked with a girl who casually told the story of someone almost kidnapping her little sister. One day she walked outside to tell her 6-year-old sister to come inside, and her sister was climbing into the open door of a car at the end of the driveway. My coworker screamed and the car drove off without the sister. When I was a child in New Hampshire, I went exploring by myself and got lost in the woods. I was not worried about it in the least, and was just walking around. All of a sudden, I noticed someone standing about 25 feet away from me, and he was just standing perfectly still facing me. He was all bundled up in a bunch of shirts and jackets, one over the other, and his face was completely hidden by what looked like dirty rags. He was wearing big flat-lensed goggles. He just stood there staring at me. I stared back for a few seconds and then turned and ran. Maybe 30 minutes later I managed to find my way back to the edge of the lake, and was able to get back to where we were staying. My friend got into a bad car accident and hit his face on the windshield. He then started filming and noticed that literally half of his face could be peeled off. It was a very clean cut, just half of the skin hanging there. It wasn't separated though, and he got a lot of stitches and recovered completely. During traumatic situations you often don't feel any pain. I was midway through a 12-hour road trip alone, driving all my college apartment stuff back to my parents' house. Car was totally overpacked with boxes, a bike, keyboard, and the like. I'm very low on gas, so I pull over to a gas station in the middle of nowhere town, Georgia. Sun is dipping low, and the gas station is empty, just off the side of the main road intersecting the highway. Few cars meander past on that road, but it's a quiet town. As I'm pumping gas, a scraggly thin guy walks up and starts mumbling about asking for the time. I tell him the time and make small talk, but not a word this man said was intelligible. All the while, he's circling the car and commenting on my stuff. But, again, I can't really understand his words too clearly. I make an excuse to duck into the convenience store, which I needed to do anyways. My bike was rattling loose and I wanted a bungee cable to affix it more securely. As I go into the store and search for a cable, I notice scraggly man also entered, and he's now talking with the clerk of the store. On a scale of 1 to meth, the scraggly man was like a 8.5. but she's hardly even a 5 on that scale. Much more trustworthy. While something about that guy gave me the creeps. Anyways, I find my cable, and as I approach the register, she makes small talk about noting my car overpacked and asked if I was moving somewhere. All the like. She asks about the cable and I explain it's to secure my bike more firmly. She then tells me I should drive my car behind the gas station and they'll help me tie it up tight. Speaking in the plural, implying what I kinda already deduced. She and the man are associates somehow. Again, my car is just outside the window of the shop, in clear view of the main road. She tells me I should drive it behind the building, where nobody could see it, for them to help me tie it up, as though that help couldn't be done in the normal refueling area. At this point, my GTFO meter is maxing out at 3.4 rungens, so I thank her but tell her I'll be okay, and then I practically jog to my car and get in, locking the doors immediately. As I leave, I watch through the window as the woman and man are in a very animated conversation, gesticulating towards my fleeing vehicle. Could I have been paranoid and misreading these people because they kinda looked like meth heads? Sure, but making an offer that's sketchy is not a very normal thing to do. You were not misreading anything, man. I'm a biologist that often has to do fieldwork surveying non-maintained private properties in the middle of nowhere. Long story short, we find a body face up in a stream deep in a thickly wooded wetland. The body looked several months old, at least. No clothes, no tools, no shelter, nothing nearby to suggest who he is or how he got there. We couldn't even tell race or gender from what we saw. We call the police and they immediately tell us it's probably the missing person who ditched his car nearby. They apparently searched for weeks with dogs, horses, and ATVs but didn't find any sign of the guy. All they found was his family car loaded with cash and a handgun. They also tell us he seemed to be running from someone or something. Real or imagined, they weren't sure. Apparently the man didn't even close his car door, just ditched it at a rail crossing and took off running into the woods in a tremendous hurry. I find his clothes about 30 yards up the stream bank from where the body was found. His pants were neatly folded and placed on top of his nice brown loafers. Underpants and socks on top of those. He placed his glasses atop his socks, very orderly and in a nice pile. His shirt and undershirt were hanging from a tree branch right above those as if to dry. I mean, the whole thing creeps me out even a year on. But what unsettles me is the fact that he ran from his family, drove several hours from his home, ditched his car, and fought a mile through briars and thick woods only to stop and carefully fold and hang his clothes before meeting his end. I look him up every now and then and still can't find any more info about what happened or why. I was at my uncle's house in some countryside with my sister and we were playing hide and seek. My uncle went out to buy some food for us. I was hiding downstairs in this weird closet attic thing I found. I heard a little banging noise and got a little spooked. I then chalked it up to a little rat or something and continued to hide. I then heard a snore and a groan. I immediately got out and ran to my sister. We both sat at the door together, crying, until my uncle got home. My uncle just laughed it off and we were relieved. A decade later, an old man's dead body was found when my uncle tried to sell the house. It was revealed he was squatting there for almost a decade and he had written in a notebook how he was going to kill my uncle and keep the home for himself. And I think that would have happened if he didn't die. When I was 12, my family and I went to Sam's Club. Being a little asshole, I decided that I didn't want to walk with my family, so I wandered around looking at clothes and books. An employee kept watching me, like staring really bad. I figured he thought I was going to steal, so I smiled at him so he knew I wasn't bad. He smiled back. He kept checking me out though, and asked me how old I was. We talked about my favorite books and video games. I remember being uncomfortable but couldn't figure out why. Because he was super nice to me. I remember wondering if he was flirting with me, but reasoned that he couldn't be. Because I'm a boy. Really weird conclusion to come to. But I was 12. I genuinely thought he was just interested in my favorite video games. The conversation died down and I decided I needed to piss. So I went into the bathroom. Less than 10 seconds later and the restroom door opens. The guy stands in front of my stall, even though there were empty ones. I recognized the guy's shoes as the employee's. I stand there for a couple minutes, done pissing, but really confused and kind of scared. I thought he followed me because he thought I was stealing. Then the guy held a camera over the stall door and took a picture of me. Like real quick. 1 or 2 pictures of me just standing there looking up at the camera. My dick wasn't out or anything. Just me. In the bathroom. Someone else came in and he immediately went to the sink and started washing his hands like he just finished using the bathroom. Then he left. It was really creepy. I didn't tell my mom anything except that the Sam's Club guy thinks I'm stealing, and she laughed. I realized WAAAY later that he was a pedophile.